Initiation into Hermetics by Franz Barden, Part 6. Step 6. Before I describe the exercises of Step 6, I shall underline once more that all the previous exercises have to be under perfect control in order to keep the balance and the higher degree of development too. It would be absolutely useless to skip one of the steps or to omit and neglect one of the exercises. Any gap would become very perceptible, and the scholar would have great difficulty to make up for one or the other problem in his development. Consequently, the main condition for success remains an excellent basic training. Magic Mental Training 6. In this step, we are faced with the meditation on the spirit. I have already been talking in detail about the mental sphere and the mental body, hence the spirit, in the theoretical part of this book. Now, it is worthwhile to look at the functions of the spirit with respect to the four elements, differentiating these functions, which can be achieved by special meditation. The properties of the spirit in conformity with the four elements are as follows. The will is subject to the fire principle. The intellect, with all its parallel aspects of intelligence and memory, underlies the principle of air. The feeling, with all its aspects, belongs to the water element, and the consciousness, with all its aspects, establishing the connection of the three elements, is subordinate to the earth principle. Look inward as into your own spirit. Observe yourself and the functions of the spirit and meditate on it. You must know how to imagine each of the functions corresponding to the element. If you manage to distinguish the functions of the spirit, that is, if you have got a clear impression about it, you may continue. This preliminary exercise is very important because it will enable the magician to influence these functions with the respective element on the mental plane in himself, as well as in others, to master and to strengthen or to eliminate them. Another exercise is to ascertain for oneself the whole mental body and the astral body together in the material body, like a hand in a fine silk glove that is put into a thick glove. Your hand ought to feel both gloves. The same thing is supposed to occur in the whole mental body. You should feel your spirit in the fine astral body and this one again in the material body. This feeling is the spirit. Meditate on this problem at any suitable opportunity. As soon as you are quite sure that your spirit is captivating the astral body as well as the material one, feeling and moving it, and that it is your spirit that performs all the actions through the two wraps, you can go one step farther. Whether consciously, half-consciously, or nearly subconsciously, everybody is executing some actions suggested by an inner or an outer impulse without paying any attention to it. The next exercise will teach you to accomplish actions fully consciously, little acts in the beginning, great ones later on. You ought to try to extend the duration of each conscious action. The wording consciously does not mean that one is all attention with the spirit, but with the imagination and the feeling that the spirit, with the help of the soul and the material body, is accomplishing the action. For example, if I am walking along the road, I do not think about the fact that I am walking, but that my spirit is walking and moving the astral and the material feet. The same thing happens to the arms and all the other parts of the body. If you are able to accomplish any action in this way for at least 10 minutes, you are mastering the exercise perfectly. The longer you can endure this without side effects such as dizziness or disturbances of balance, all the better for you. For this particular reason, it is advisable to begin first with small actions over a short spell of time and to extend them as long as you like. This experiment is very important because it will give the scholar the possibility to accomplish any action with a mental as well as astral connection with the material body according to his working with the mental or the astral sphere. Such an action is called the magical action. The scholar will certainly understand now why magic rituals never show any success with persons who have not been initiated or who have not been trained in magic, because people like these do not own the capacity of executing the ritual magically. That is, they are not prepared to work in connection with the material stuff in a mental and astral way. Let us take the example of a magnetizer putting his hands on a patient's body or performing magnetic strokes, but without allowing his mental and astral hand to emanate at the same time, nor imagining that the mental force is pervading and influencing the spirit, the astral power doing the same to the astral body of the patient, and the material power influencing the material body. This magnetizer will never achieve anything else but a partial success, because the patient does indeed consist of all the three components, namely the body, the soul, and the spirit. That goes without saying for the magician, that the mental body is only influencing the mental sphere or the spirit in the same way as the astral body affects the astral sphere only, that is, the soul, and the material body concerns the material body only. This law has to be respected. Hence, it is necessary for the magician to adopt a mental as well as a psychic disposition in order to perform actions whether as a spirit or in connection with the soul. Once he has understood this problem very well and mastered the practice perfectly, he can advance in his development. The next task will deal with the magical training of the senses. First of all, a very important preliminary exercise. Similarly to the previous exercise, you are realizing in this one as well that not your material eyes see everything, but that it is the spirit that perceives all with the help of the astral and the physical eyes. Meditate on this problem as often as possible. You will have to imagine for at least 5 minutes that the spirit is looking through the physical eyes and actually does see. The longer you are able to endure this, all the better for you. You will become a master here as well by constant repetition of this experiment. Having achieved a success in this exercise with the eyes, turn to the ears by realizing that it is not your physical ear that is receiving the sound waves, but that the mental ears are perceiving everything with the help of the astral and the material eyes. If you can book the same result as you did in the case of the eyes, continue in the same manner with the senses and imagine that the spirit, with the help of the astral and the material body, is feeling objects, cold, warmth, etc. Practice this experiment diligently until you can master it with the eyes, ears, and the feeling. Should you wish to develop special faculties, try it also with the olfactory sense and the taste. But the keenest attention should be paid to the three sense organs of seeing, hearing, and feeling, which are the most useful for practical magic. If you achieve good results in the mental ascertainment of the senses, try to adjust your spirit to two of the senses at the same time. Begin with the eyes and the ears. If you manage to bring it about for at least 5 minutes without any interruption, adjust your spirit to three senses at once, that is, seeing, hearing, and feeling. If you can manage this as well, you have indeed made progress in your magical development. This preliminary exercise is very important for the so-called clairvoyants, clairaudience, and clairsentience, and ought to be mastered perfectly. The scholar will find the principal exercise in Step 7 of this course. Magic Psychic Training 6 in Step 5. We learn how to project the elements outwards. Now we shall go farther and learn how to master the Akasha principle with respect to the elements. It has been mentioned in the theoretical part that the elements originate in the Akasha principle, by which they are dominated and kept in the correct balance. After a long time of exercising, a magician who has achieved good results with the elements will also be able to control the finest principle, that is the astral ether. The exercise is as follows. Take up your usual position asana and close your eyes. Imagine that you are in the center of an unlimited space. There is no above or below or sideways. This unlimited space is filled with the finest energetic matter, the universal ether. Ether is colorless, but to our senses it appears to be of ultraviolet, near black-violet color, and this is the color in which we imagine the etheric matter. You are inhaling this etheric matter and conveying it deliberately through pulmonary breathing to the blood. If you have achieved a certain skill in doing so, Execute the same operation by breathing through the lungs and pores as you did in the accumulation of vital power, but with the difference that you inhale the colored ether and fill your whole body with it instead of with the vital power. In performing this exercise, you have to retain the feeling of being united to the entire infinite space. You have to be, as it were, completely secluded from the world. It is necessary to become acquainted with this unusual state of mind. In any case, you ought to avoid losing consciousness and falling asleep. Supposing that you do feel tired, break off the exercise immediately and choose another time when you are more fit. After some successful exercises in the whole body pore breathing with Akasha, you can go ahead. We have heard that Akasha is the primary source, the sphere of all causes. Any deliberate cause, such as a wish, a thought, any imagination created in this sphere together with the dynamic conviction is bound to be realized with the help of the elements, regardless of the level or sphere on which the realization necessarily has to be performed. This is one of the greatest magic mysteries and a universal key for the magician, who will understand its range only later on in the course of his development. The scholar should always keep his mind on his own ethical development, which will certainly help him to do only good and noble deeds. Our next exercise will be to win absolute control of the elements with the help of the Akasha principle in all the three realms. The exercise is as follows. You are sitting in your usual position, inhaling a stream of Akasha through the lungs and pores and filling the whole body with it. At this point, I would like to mention that Akasha cannot be accumulated in the same way as vital power. At the very inhaling, you must imagine that you are starting the control of the four elements. Consider that you have already got the faculty of mastering the elements, and that they will fulfill everything you are ordering or wishing for, no matter on which plane the realization of your desires has to happen. With every breath, you ought to feel your mastery of the elements. The faith and the confidence in your control of the elements has to be unshakable and imperturbable. You must not allow yourself the faintest doubt. Anyone who is working scrupulously through all these exercises will gain the absolute control of the elements after more or less exercising. A magician who has established the magical balance in himself with respect to the elements, having ennobled his character and having acquired the highest virtues and ideals, will very soon attain this power. He will feel his faith becoming as firm as a rock and will be absolutely sure of his conviction, which excludes any doubt at all. On the other hand, any person who has not been working scrupulously enough, or scholars who skipped any steps and neglected exercises will feel doubtful about one problem or another, and the influence of one element that is keeping him in check most of the time will not tolerate to be mastered. Here and now the scholar will realize why such a high value is set on scrupulousness and endurance in the execution of the exercises. There is no gap allowed to spring up in the process of development. Otherwise, the scholar will fall behind, and some of the problems could only be set right under the greatest difficulties. A scholar who is perfectly sure of his mastering the elements will soon notice that he is capable of projecting the elements on all planes very easily, outwards as well as inwards, so that all seems to be a child's play to him. Having arrived at this point, the magician can turn to transferring the power of the elements into a suitable ritual. I have talked about this problem in detail already in the chapter about the rituals. The magician forms any ritual after his own liking by means of finger positions and gestures of the hands into which he is transferring the power. According to his magical development, he will certainly dispose of a sufficient amount of intuition so that he can compose the ritual suitable to the element in question. He can provide it with a self-selected word formula and link it to a certain sound corresponding to the element Kabbalah. It is quite impossible to make a mistake here because the rituals are absolutely individual, purely personal. Herefore, the rituals that the magician composes for this purpose are not to be imparted to anyone else. Another person could attain the same success in mastering the elements by using these rituals, which of course would happen at the expense of the power of the magician who actually composed the rituals. Supposing that a person who does not have the magical maturity makes use of such rituals, he would certainly suffer great damage and bring ill fate to other people for whom the rituals have been used. Therefore, be very careful and select only a kind of ritual that you can use in a large crowd, as without anyone observing it. For example, a ritual with a finger position in your pocket. The genuine magician will regard this warning as fully justified. First of all, the magician must try to compose the ritual for an element of the astral sphere with which he is putting the virtue of one element in operation, and at the same time another ritual with the help of which he can dissolve this power again instantly if he chooses. In the same way, he ought to operate with the other three elements, thus creating by his power 8 rights for the astral sphere and 8 for the material production as well. As soon as the rights become automatic by a long period of exercising and repeating, it will be sufficient to use the ritual only, which will make the elements start working immediately according to the purpose to be accomplished. If the magician wishes the effect to be cancelled, it will be enough to use the necessary revoking rite. This method should become a habit that renders performance easy and possible without any effort or imagination at all. I mentioned before that the magician is able to achieve everything through the action of the elements in the astral, as well as in the material world. To attain this state of maturity, a great amount of patience, endurance, and tenacity will be required. Even then, when the scholar is developing more and more on higher levels, he ought to work at mastering the elements until he really becomes a true master. Provided he is possessed by high ideals and wants to do good deeds only to help mankind, divine providence will bless him, endowing him with unexpected faculties to make the most of them. Magic physical training 6. In this step, any special training of the body is no longer necessary, but we shall practically use all the occult powers that the scholar has obtained in the course of the exercises, provided he followed all of the methods scrupulously and the practices really became habits. The scholar can, of course, deepen the exercises to obtain a better success. It is impossible to describe the entire practice of magic that a scholar could master eventually, because it would require another volume. I will only select some of the most interesting facts from the lot. In the meantime, the scholar has matured so much that he will succeed in the practice of lower magic without any exception, especially if he aims only at high and noble ideals. 1. Deliberate creation of elementals. In contrast to thoughts living in their forms in the mental or spiritual sphere, the elementals are entities with a certain degree of intelligence deliberately created by a magician. Such elementals are capable of fulfilling certain tasks on the mental plane, and obviously they may be looked at as obedient servants of the magician according to the purpose he aims at. Through the creation of elementals of the so-called elemental magic type, the magician can accomplish everything on the mental plane without any discrimination of his own or a strange sphere. I will quote only a few examples just because of the great variety. With the help of the elementals, the magician can influence the mind of any other person optionally. He can strengthen or weaken man's mental and intellectual faculties. He can protect himself or others against foreign influences, transmute friendships into animosities, or the other way around. He can produce a favorable atmosphere in associating with his fellow men, and he can bring under his control anybody's will that is not yet developed or profiled. The businessman can enlarge the number of his customers, and the elementals can be helpful to him in many other ways. The genuine magician will always be inspired by good and noble intentions and keep the altruistic motive in mind if he is aiming at the highest level of magical maturity. The practice of creating elementals is very simple and an affair of the magician's imagination, but the following rules must be considered. 1. The elemental has to be given a form corresponding to the desire one wishes to be fulfilled. The form is to be created by intensive imagination. 2. The form, the so-called vessel or housing, has to be given a name of some sort. Everything existing, whether in a particular shape or shapeless, does have a name. If it has no name, it does not exist. 3. The task is to impress on the elemental with the help of the willpower and the imaginative faculty. That is, an authoritative order has to be given with respect to the kind of effect to be produced. Here as well, the present or imperative form formula must be retained in exactly the same way as I described it in the chapter dealing with subconsciousness. 4. The effectiveness is to be impressed on the elemental regardless, whether it be a question of a permanent or a restricted effect. These four fundamental rules are to be respected if one intends to work successfully with elementals. I will render the practice even more understandable, and an illustrative case may show how it can be done. Supposing the magician intends to enforce someone's memory or any other intellectual faculty with the help of an elemental, the procedure is as follows. The magician imagines a universal ocean of light, from the luminous matter of which he shapes an enormous ball of light, compressing and accumulating it more and more with the help of his imagination, until this ball has the size of approximately 12 to 20 inches. By this accumulation of light, the ball has become similar to a radiating sun. Now the magician impregnates this light ball with the desire and the firm conviction that it will exhibit the same power and quality as is supposed to revive and reinforce the desired mental faculty, such as memory, eloquence, etc., in the respective person. As soon as the magician has shaped this mental sun or ball, he must give it a suitable name, say Lucis or the like. Besides, he is fixing the time when this ball is to affect the mental sphere of the person with terms like these. You ought to work in the mental sphere until the person concerned has attained the desired faculty in such a way that this faculty has become a habit. Having fixed the time, the magician orders the elemental to dissolve in and return to the ocean of light as soon as it has fulfilled its task. Expressing it magically, the birth and death of the elemental are fixed in exactly the same manner as man's or any other being's fate is. Considering the fact that an elemental knows neither time nor space, it may be directed to the mental sphere of the respective person. Its sending off happens quite suddenly, as if the connecting link between yourself and the elemental were torn. At the same moment, one turns to another job. One ceases to remember the elemental that has just been created. One may also accompany the breaking up with a certain farewell gesture, just as one did while creating it. All this is left entirely to the discretion of the scholar who, at this present state of development, should be quite capable of giving such and similar instructions himself. The more detached from the magician that such an elemental is, the more effective it will be in the mental sphere of the person for whom it was created. It can work independently in the mental sphere and will not be restricted in any way by the magician's mind. Now and again, it is advisable to reload the elemental to give it a greater power of expansion. This is achieved by calling the elemental by the name given to it, back from the mental sphere of the person concerned, rendering it more dynamic through a new accumulation of light and sending it up again. As soon as the elemental has fulfilled the required task, it will dissolve itself in the ocean of light. This example should suffice to give the magician a rule of conduct how to create elementals. The experiment described here often is used by adepts for the purpose of inspiring and strengthening scholars of low standard. Let us now turn to another similar topic that makes us acquainted with the so-called larvae. The difference between an elemental and a larva is basically the fact that an elemental is created deliberately by the magician, whereas the larvae form themselves involuntarily in the corresponding mental sphere as the result of a strong physical excitement, no matter what kind of excitement this happens to be. The stronger the excitement is, The more mental material a person is subsiding, the larva will become all the stronger, denser, and more viable, especially in the case of a regular and frequent repetition of the same physical excitement. This involuntary formation of larvae occurs in any human being, young or old, magically trained or not, regardless whether the person knows or ignores it. If the physical excitement is fading due to the fact that no attention has been paid to the upsetting affair, the larva too will disappear by and by until finally dissolving itself. Consequently, there will be in the mental sphere a constant bringing forth and dying of larvae, naturally at the cost of the mental matter of each human being. We are causing these events by our own psychic excitement. The reasons can be very different, usually fear, grief, sorrow, fright, hatred, and envy, and such like producing them. The shape that the larva shows depends on the cause of the psychic excitement and is always symbolic. Anyone who knows something about symbolism will be able to get a clear idea about this problem. For example, a thought of love will always be symbolized by a heart, a thought of hatred by an arrow or a flash, etc. In spite of the fact that the larvae, these undesirable mental inhabitants, cannot be seen by the normal human being, they still do exist, and the well-trained magician can see them on the mental plane. In sensitive or excitable persons, the mental matter is much more separable, and the reproduction of larvae is obviously easier and more intense. Such people wreck themselves, their health, especially their nerves, but they also damage their intellectual faculties and involve other highly suggestible people too. All kinds of mass psychosis are originating here. There is no need to describe mass psychosis in detail, because everybody will have made observations and had experiences regarding this problem. The more one returns to the cause of the psychic excitement, and the more attention one pays to it, the stronger the larva will become. Any larva that is condensed very strongly will show a great deal of self-preservation instinct and will try to prolong its duration of life as far as possible. For this reason, it stimulates the mind of the given person, trying at every opportunity to draw his attention to the cause of excitement and to revive it constantly. Such a well-fed larva can become fatal to a sensitive or emotional individual, and numerous mental disturbances such as persecution mania and the like are the result of it. Many people are living under the erroneous supposition of being haunted and destroyed by black magicians, whereas they are in fact victims of their own fantasies, or putting it correctly, victims of the larva they have been creating themselves. People like this usually will not find out about this problem until they leave their mortal frame. Only a very few persons are actually haunted magically. Think of the numerous Inquisition victims of the past. No doubt there is a certain advantage for the average man in that the old order has changed, yielding to a new one. For if a man's belief is bad, it will not be changed by burning. But one has thrown out the baby with the bath water without touching the roots of the matter and without verifying the higher laws. Now the magician will realize why such stress has been laid on the importance of introspection, control, and mastering of the thoughts at the beginning of the practical part of this work. Supposing he did not get the thoughts under control of his willpower in the course of his development, he would unconsciously create larvae that might become fatal to him sooner or later. Next, I am going to describe another group of entities existing in the mental sphere, namely the group of the phantoms or phantasms. The difference between a larva and a phantasm is as follows. A larva is quite unconsciously adopting a shape in the mental sphere appropriate to the motive of the single or repeated psychic emotion, whereas a phantom accepts a certain form originating in the fantasy of man. Exactly in the same way as it happens to be with the larvae, the phantom is likewise reinforced, revived, and animated by the repeated evocation of the picture, regardless of whatever the matter might be, and it will be capable of influencing not only the mental or astral plane, but also the material level. Two examples may serve to illustrate this topic. A very remarkable example is the so-called magic persecution mania that I shall describe from two certain points of view with reference to the phantoms. There are certain human beings with an innate scowl or with demoniacal features, and whose outward appearance consequently gives the impression of black magicians, but who probably haven't got the faintest idea of any human science, to say nothing at all of magic. It is sufficient for any easily suggestible, emotionally excitable, or rather conceited person to meet with such a type of man, whether in business or in personal concern, and our test subject, as we shall call it, will instantly have the sensation of a strong dislike and antipathy towards the antagonist. It can happen that our type is exhibiting a whimsical behavior without wanting to do so, or even knowing about it. The first thought entering the test subject's mind will be that he is facing a black magician. Maybe, for some reason or other, this test person is not thinking too highly of this type of man, and the first step towards self-suggestion has already been done. Sooner or later, small, awkward, everyday incidents will never be cleared up, but the blame for them will be set on our type of man. From now on, the attention is stirred up, one is watching oneself, and the picture of the type becomes more distinct. Already one begins to feel persecuted. The eyes grow more glittering. His appearance reveals itself in dreams. The picture becomes more vivid and eventually emerges even in broad daylight. Finally, one constantly lives under the impression of being persecuted at every turn. With the help of a very lively imagination, the picture can be condensed to such a degree that it becomes visible even to other similarly sensitive persons. Feeling persecuted in this manner, with the picture continually working on his mind, our test subject may be argued into anything, even the worst. He looks for help, begins to pray, and does his best to scare away this terrible influence. He gets a nervous breakdown, gradually becomes insane, and ends up by committing suicide or else in a mental hospital for the rest of his life. The phantom has fulfilled its task. How terrific is the shock, however, if such a spirit must convince itself in the mental sphere that it is committing a well-organized magic suicide. What a bitter disappointment. Our type man, of course, has not the faintest idea of what happened and will never realize that he was nothing but a means to an end. His face and his conduct were only the form, the pattern from which our test subject created the destructive being, the phantom whose victim he became in the end. Such and similar sad examples happen more frequently than you would believe, sometimes faster, more drastically, in other cases more slowly, furtively, insidiously. But should you dare to tell the persecuted person the truth, he would never believe it because the phantom knows well how to hinder its victims from escaping. If the guiding hand of divine providence leads such an unhappy persecuted person to a genuine magician who finds out the phantom's trickery, he will have a very difficult task to convince the victim, to lead him to the right path, and to teach him a different, normal mode of thinking. At certain times, especially if the victim is under the spell of a phantom, the helper will have to interfere very firmly indeed, now and again, even drastically to restore the mental balance of the individual. The second example shows the same occurrence, but with a different underlying motive. Here we have to deal with a phantom of eroticism. The birth of such a phantom, if one may use the expression of birth at all, takes place in the face, the beautiful body of a living person, sometimes only a photo, a pornographic illustration, or something similar with the purpose of provoking the lust, the sexual instinct, regardless of the person belonging to the female or male sex. Provided anyone being in love, having no opportunity at all of satisfying his personal longing, the stronger and more vehement this yearning will grow, and at the same time, the phantom's insinuations will become stronger because it is thriving entirely on thoughts of yearning. The more the concerned person tries to resist this unsatisfied love, the more obtrusive the phantom will become. At first, it will turn up in dreams and allow its victim to revel in the most delightful transport of love. A little later, it will provoke the sexual instinct and allow sexual intercourse in the victim's dreams. The pollutions produced in this way help the phantom to become denser and to influence the victim more and more, because the sperm represents the vital power that the phantom is sucking up like a vampire. The point in question here is not the material sperm, but the animal vital power accumulated in the sperm. The victim is losing the ground under his feet. His willpower is diminishing, and the phantom gradually wins the upper hand. If fate is not so kind to such a one as to have him enlightened in good time and to find the right distraction for him, the phantom's mode of action will result in more dangerous effects. The person becomes confused, stops eating, the nerves are overexcited, and such like. The love phantom can be condensed to such a degree by unsatisfied passion that it can adopt bodily forms, seducing his victim to onanism and other artificial stimulation of the genital organs. Thousands of people have fallen victims of phantoms by committing suicide as the result of disappointment in love or unsatisfied passions. This problem recalls the memory of true occurrences of the medieval succubi and the trials for witchcraft connected therewith. A very dangerous pleasure indeed. In the light of the two foregoing instances, the magician may observe the activity of the phantasms, and he will be able to form such specters himself. But do not forget, sooner or later, he always will run the risk of being influenced or mastered by them. He knows what is happening in the average individual and how to produce these phantasms consciously in the magic way, but never will he be induced to execute such practices himself, always remembering the magic sentence: love is the love, but love under a strong will. There is one theme left to be described, that of the phantasms or shadows. Phantasms are animate presentations of people already deceased. I will pay particular attention to this theme to avoid many errors and enable everyone to sift the chaff from the wheat. As soon as a human being leaves behind the mortal frame, it is at once in the fourth state of aggregation, usually called the world beyond. Without any mediating substance, it is impossible for a being to operate on our tridimensional sphere, just as a fish cannot swim without water. The same thing prevails upon beings already passed away to the world beyond. Remembering, praising, mourning the deceased, any memory of or tribute to them will create and enliven imaginary pictures of the dead, which as a result of frequent repetition have a rather long duration of life. We call these pictures, created by the living ones, phantoms. It is this kind of phantom that manifests themselves in great numbers to the so-called spiritualists, evokers, diviners, etc. The spooks and hobgoblins also are nothing else but phantoms preserving, condensing, and thriving on the affection and attachment of the bereaved ones, as it happens in the case of the shadows. This can be stated without difficulty by citing a being that manifests itself in different places at the same minute at once through so-called mediums, which is nothing but a manifestation of the dead person's phantom, because phantoms can be created by the hundreds. It is very sad that these phantoms always are mistaken for the real dead person by the spiritualistic mediums. A lot of mischief, self-deception, and fraud is carried out in this line. One can observe, for instance, that one of the mediums is communicating with a famous leader or general, a second one with an artist, another with a saint, in a different place with a pharaoh, and immediately again with an angel. Therefore, it is not at all surprising that this particular field of knowledge will meet with a host of opponents and mockers because of its amount of self-deception. No wonder that a phantom has such a strong instinct of self-preservation as to present itself as a vampire to the medium or the whole circle, and indeed becomes fatal to the neighborhood as well. Of course, all this does not mean that a genuine magician who masters the fourth state of aggregation, the Akasha principle, would not be able to communicate with a deceased person, or with an intellect that is not yet embodied. I have already quoted the practice in the chapter about mediumistic writing. Apart from that, any magician is able to form a housing, a shape, with the help of the imagination, transfer it into the fourth state of aggregation, and to persuade or even to force the true, desired being to enter this form and manifest itself to the external world. This practice belongs to the field of necromancy or conjuring magic and has nothing at all to do with the generally known spiritualism. The genuine magician will use this practice only in extreme cases, and he will not evoke a being away from its sphere, because anything a being of the fourth state of aggregation has to say or to fulfill in the material or astral world can be achieved likewise by the magician himself through his maturity. Summary of exercises of Step 6. I. Magic mental training. 1. Meditation on the own spirit. 2. Becoming conscious of the senses in the spirit. 2. Magic psychic training. 1. Preparation to master the Akasha principle. 2. Deliberate induction to trance with the help of the Akasha. 3. Mastering of the elements with the help of an individual ritual from the Akasha. 3. Magic physical training. 1. Deliberate creation of beings. A. Elementals. B. Larvae. C. Phantasms, shadows. D. Phantoms. End of Step 6. Stay tuned for Part 7 of Initiation into Hermetics. Peace, blessings, and much love to you all. On Earth, there was once a people who held the knowledge of the universe across space and time. They were the Israelites. Over time, their wisdom was scattered among all nations, with each taking a piece. In the end, this left them destitute. Now, listen to this profound wisdom passed down through great works, presented in your voice, from your own perspective, from the perspective of the Israelites themselves. For early access to chapters and full audiobooks, consider becoming a member. For just $10 per month, you can unlock exclusive access to this priceless wisdom, once stolen from our ancestors. Hear their voices through your own as you join us on this journey of discovery and reclamation.